People of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, hopefully I didn't wobble the camera too much there. Welcome! I just got back from seeing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Welcome to my underline no spoilers review. If you're brand new here on the channel, do not worry. I tend to take pride in my no spoiler reviews in terms of, you know, that kind of channel out there that puts no spoiler review, but then they still somewhat put a spoiler in there. I don't do that. Yeah, I still manage, hence the name Boba Talks, managed to talk a little while about it. So I have no idea, to be honest, how long this video will go on for, but I imagine I'll be talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness for quite a bit of time, try and get into it, and give you the best vibe of the movie you can possibly have, whether you've seen it or haven't seen it, you know? Of course, if you have seen the movie, please do not spoil it for those down in the comments below. So very lightly, from what you can gather from the trailers, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness involves, well, you know, suffice to say, quite the journey. Let's just say that shit gets wild, and it really is, I would say, the most horror a Marvel movie could probably get within the MCU without slapping on a certain age restricting rating on it. And interestingly, after literally having just seen the movie, it's very fresh in my mind. There isn't as much multiverse despite multiverse being in the title. I mean, there is. I mean, of course, before anyone says, oh, but clearly there was this moment at 46 minutes and 2 seconds. You know, I'm not saying there isn't, but there is more madness. That, I would say, is like, oh man, that seems to be the part that Raimi signed on for. One thing that I'm seeing recently as well, that's kind of making me chuckle a bit, so do excuse me if I do chuckle, just because I feel like the MCU or audiences or critics for these movies have been enjoying a fairly consistent, cohesive tone throughout the movies of the MCU, and one of the common things coming out of reviews right now is that it might not fit as well with the formula of the MCU, as if that's a bad thing. Well, it's just like, you know, for once we're not consuming product in terms of like typical MCU stuff, and that's a bad thing. What? No. I mean, like, come on. I'm dying for that. And oddly to me, even though I've just said that, it both does and doesn't break the mold. Because I don't want to be out there and be all hyperbolic and just be like, oh, this is the MCU movie that breaks the mold of all the MCU movies that you've seen before in the different phases and stuff. Don't get me wrong. Sam Raimi, with the horror tones within the Multiverse of Madness and his overall, you know, Raimi stamp, if you will, does indeed venture off the typical MCU movie formula, but it still does both at the same time feel very much so like an MCU film. It's just what is refreshing about it, akin to some of these comments you may be hearing, is that they did something a bit different, and you can tell that even from the trailers with the approach this tone has during the movie. Just given the story that unfolds, it just kind of demands this really bold tone that we're about to get into here. To give you another example or comparison, it's kind of like what Moon Knight does in a way. It's MCU, but it feels different, as everyone has more or less acknowledged now. It's kind of like, you know, an incoming weird Boba analogy here. I'm kind of known for doing this on the channel. I know they're strange, but it's like using a brand of shampoo, for example, you know? But what you do is you get a different one, a different smell, except it's not a different brand. It's just a different smell of shampoo that you're using. Same brand, same bottle, but this week on the frickin' shopping cart, you got a different one. It's the same, but a little bit different. And I don't think we should be alienated when new movies try different tonal things that give you that weird analogy comparison smell. I think we should, you know, welcome it. And that's one thing that was welcoming me into this movie as I was watching it and going along. Yet, at the same time, I don't think you should have huge expectations for it. Now, what I mean is that I enjoyed it, however, I wasn't blown away by it. And this is where we get into that part of the review, and this is something that isn't unique to one fan base like movie fans. It's also any kind of fandom, from gaming to whatever. But it reminds me of something like that of WandaVision. So it's kind of like, you know, if you're expecting full-blown, crazy, mind-blowing House of M-style adaptation moments, similar to a thing of how, as I was just mentioning, like in WandaVision, some fans, as a result of theory crafting or just kind of adopt an actual expectation, like, this is going to be in a movie. Mephisto is appearing, and when it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, this is bad. If you have that level of stuff, I would most certainly dial down the meter there, like 100%, because I think that will just ultimately serve you in your viewing to have a bit of a better experience. And I think I'm mainly talking to like hardcore MCU, like ride or die kind of fans there. But even for me, who had, I was excited for this movie. Believe it or not, Doctor Strange in the MCU, Benedict Cumberbatch, is one of my favorite characters, and just in general, one of the more interesting characters I look forward to seeing in any shape or form. But my expectations, I always temper them in general, and even then, I found this movie not mind-blowing, again, getting back to that. But continuing on, Sam Raimi's directing this movie. Is it a Sam Raimi movie? Yes. Like, it is a Sam Raimi MCU movie, and that is being spoken so crystal clear, because just because a certain director may be behind an MCU movie, this is the ironic thing what we were talking about earlier. Sometimes they don't break the mold, despite whoever's directing it. It's almost as if you could get a template bot director directing these movies sometimes, and they don't always have a creative hold on it. And I'm not saying that's the case for every MCU movie, but again, this is speaking to the larger point of, oh, this one actually feels, a little bit different. You can clearly tell that Sam Raimi is present in the fabric that weaved this movie. Whether that's from the action sequences that you can tell that it's him, to the various camera shots, to his horror moments and the exchange from that to just these cheesy moments, if you will. And what I mean by cheesy, by the way, it isn't like an inherently bad thing. There is some cheesy dialogue moments here and there, like for sure, and that is just injected into some scenes that 100% screams Raimi. And it's almost, I guess, kind of like a backhanded compliment here. Normally I wouldn't be all about cheese, but with this director combined with this movie and these scenes, you just kind of roll with it. At least I did. Yeah, more than what I would before. But back to some of those horror comments. There is a very consistent tone of horror felt throughout this movie. It's not in like every single second of the movie, but it's 100% one of its strongest strokes of paint. However, when it comes to this, I wish there was almost like this R-rated version of this film, and some of you may be thinking this is like a redundant thing to say. Of course, it's not going to be an R-rated thing, but this is, I think, where it struggles with the level it tries to go to but doesn't quite go to, and thus is kind of caught between, I'm over here, but I'm also being over there at the same time, and I don't think that serves the movie as well as one would hope. And what I mean by that R-rated version is that I feel like there are moments in the movie, and you'll know them when you see them, and it's like they filmed it displaying the full gore, as if there is a cut, like where these moments happen and stuff, but it might cut off camera or something. It might be done in such a way where you like that, and then it's like, oh, yeah, oh. Oh, yeah, cool, but yeah, okay. And that was just, I guess, for me, in my experience, a bit frustrating at times. I mean, I get it. You can't show it. But it's like this movie hinges right on the edge of wanting to do that, as I was just getting into. And it sets it up, but it doesn't release it at its potential at those times. Due to having this, in-between stuck phase of that, it's as if the movie is trying to squeeze between what it is doing and what it clearly kind of wants to do, or what Raimi really wants to do. And really, it just feels like with such an aspiration to do that, and it's very evident, it's just like, oh, when it doesn't happen. And again, just I don't think it really serves the movie, even though those moments are still very enjoyable. It's like it's struggling between those two identities, even though it's still within the one identity of horror. There's two different ways to execute it, and it's like it's trying to be both at once. That's the way to put it. And this all just kind of bleeds into somewhat of the anarchy that is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And that is through and through. It is really entertaining that way, and I believe most of the audiences will be really entertained. Not just from the multiverse concept, which has been quite a big thing of very recent years, because obviously, darting between multiverses and the Easter eggs that come with that, and all looking over here and that, it is all fun and games. However, going back to the anarchy comment, what I mean really is the action left, right, and center is pretty much as soon as the movie picks up, with very few moments of even getting a breather. And that is, sure, a lot of the Marvel movies are filled with action, but I feel like with this one, there's a certain tempo to that action where, yeah, there are breather moments, but very few of them, and it's kind of like you're in a constant, some of the main characters are in a constant in danger mode, and it's like, oh god, and that really kind of keeps you along for the ride, and ultimately, the word is entertained. And with some of that action, there is, blood, this, I guess, bleeds into that horror thing, as I was saying. Lots of blood, to be fair, in certain parts. And I see there's a little bit of a debate between some people online saying, oh, it is scary for some people, like, you know, oh, this kid would be too scared in that viewing kind of thing. But then there's some people saying it isn't scary. I don't know. I guess every kid is different. Some may be more desensitized to things like this than others. They clearly think it fits a certain age rating. For me, it's not that bad. Like, it's not scary, it's just more tasteful, what Raimi did with the horror, and the consistency of that felt throughout the movie. Don't get me wrong, there are borderline edging on the graphical moments, of which we've already spoken about, where it doesn't quite fully achieve the kind of peak of where that could go, which is what I mentioned to be frustrating at times, because clearly it felt like it wanted to be that. But to say, is that too scary for some kid to handle? Sure, maybe for some, but I would say the majority probably not. Now, the plot itself was fairly straightforward, and what I would say is one of the more straightforward, simple stories that I feel can be done. It was pretty clear cut that way. It's like, despite being a Multiverse of Madness film, which, you know, insinuates a fairly, I guess one can assume, complicated scenario to be in the plot of the movie. Just kind of more like, oh, this is happening, oh, this person's doing this, you know, one of the main characters, and as a result, we gotta do this, and let's just watch that unfold. You could say that's the same for every movie, but no, but I really mean it's pretty much as simple as that. It's very clear cut. As much as there is lots of things going on with the trippy aspects of this spoony film that Raimi inserts, the characters and the motivations and what is going on and what you need to understand isn't nearly as complex as what you may have thought that you would need to wrap your head around. Now, unfortunately, I think there are certain things that are shown in trailers which, you know, they just shouldn't have done, to the point of where I seriously think they basically shouldn't have even shown, like, the Illuminati stuff that was heavily displayed in the trailers. I think that would have just been a really cool surprise. You know, at the same time, you have to take into account the marketing and what they're trying to achieve, and that's to, oh, I want to see this movie because, look, there's an Illuminati council throne room, and we oh my god, what's that going to be? But again, I feel like it actually hurts the movie, especially when it comes to those cameos. And for me, guys, it was underwhelming. And, you know, I can already imagine there's going to be that comments of someone saying, you know, why can't some people just be whelmed? You know, we should be grateful that we... No, it really was kind of underwhelming. There is, of course, stuff to be appreciated. I'd be crazy to say that I didn't appreciate things in these moments in the movie that I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to seeing. But this also dials into my expectations comment from earlier on in this review. Now, the CGI was at times, but also pretty sweet at other times. You know, there's that scene, for example, of where it was pretty blare, that release clip of Strange saving America Chavez, and where there was that continuity error with that guy running with his suitcase in like 3 or 4 different angles of Strange doing his spell thing. But that's what I mean. The CGI is kind of like, again, I'm not a CGI freak who comes down too hard on this stuff, but even to me, it was pretty noticeable at points. But that being said, everyone, then again, there was some really cool stuff. Like, this is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. There's going to be a lot of colorful, you know, creative things thrown at you in this movie. And as a result, there is lots of cool moments at many areas of the movie, such as I still really appreciate a lot of the visuals in the movie. The multiverse stuff was pretty to look at. America Chavez's powers were really clean and pristine looking. And that also goes to say that the way that Sam Raimi handled some of the more kind of colorful parts in the film and more, as I like to say, spoony parts in the movie were really creative, and there's just so many times like that throughout the film that fit well into the craziness that is just genuinely kind of unfolding at every given moment. As I said, with very few little breather moments, you know, kind of trying to break it off, but it still does feel like one kind of continuous Indiana Jones ball going after him as he tries to run away. Now, as for Benedict Cumberbatch, I just feel like Benedict was Benedict in, like, and that's a compliment. He's still Doctor Strange. He's good. His dynamic with America Chavez was good. She was an interesting character. Seeing mixed things about her, but for me, she had a lot of screen time, but I didn't really feel like that took away from the other characters. Like, you know, Wanda has so much screen time. It feels like just as much as Doctor Strange himself. She wasn't really annoying to me. I wasn't blown away by her, but she just, you know, sometimes these characters that come into movies, we're going to bring her along for the ride kind of thing, doesn't always work out the best way, especially when you have this, like, larger thing going on. But hey, I didn't think it was that bad. Not bad at all. Now, Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda is, needless to say, her performance is great. Like, I really love Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. Now, personally, side note, despite some of the, legit criticism for WandaVision, I really personally enjoyed the ride, mainly because I was pretty invested in the emotional heart and tragedy of what Wanda experienced. I felt like maybe it was just more performance, but the story there between her, what the tragic character that she is with losing Vision, the kids and stuff like that, I was pretty invested in. And if you were into all of that as well with what Elizabeth Olsen brought there with the performance, she definitely does double down here with what goes on in this movie. Now, obviously with WandaVision, if you've seen it, it does somewhat, this is a weird situation, I do feel like it does both bolster what you see in this movie, yet at the same time, it doesn't feel like it adheres to WandaVision, which kind of is a weird situation. Like, it kind of, I don't want to go as far as say wrongs WandaVision, but it's like, again, they didn't adhere to it too much, albeit there are grains of stuff that carries over from it. And what I mean by that is, I assume most people would have seen WandaVision, but if you haven't seen it, then perhaps you won't be as invested in the story with Wanda that she has in this movie, but you'll still, like, enjoy the Scarlet Witch in God mode, that's for sure. And when I mean God mode, by the way, I mean Wanda comes down hard in this movie, and this all speaks to the action I've been praising. It's a continuous tempo of, oh shit, barrage of just crazy crap going on everywhere. But going back to what I was saying, is that one thing I will say with the resolve of Wanda in WandaVision is that there's a bit of like an off-screen 180 here in this movie that you don't really see. It's to the point of where I think Kevin Feige, I've read recently, has even said that fans do not need to have watched WandaVision to understand Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is just kind of odd to me. I mean, technically for sure, you don't need to. You can see what she's going for in the movie. You can see, okay, this is what's happening. But I feel like I take that quote in a different way, as per what quite a few other people are saying as well, in where he says you don't need to have watched WandaVision, it feels like they're not really adhering to the story of WandaVision. I mean, they are, because clearly there's things in this movie, I'm not trying to disregard that, but it just feels as though from a chronological standpoint, it shows how much they've somewhat strayed from what WandaVision went for in many areas with the story for a character during all those episodes. And there is like some mild explanation as to what leads her story in this movie, I suppose you could say, but again, it doesn't feel handled all that properly, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more between the end of WandaVision and then up until where things pick up in Doctor Strange 2. Now, as with a lot of movies, rule of cool moments are fun. Sometimes there's too many of them and it hurts the quality of the story and the writing as like an overall product. Some people mind this, some people don't mind this, and they like the face value entertainment and don't give a crap if rule a cool moment or however many of them are chosen in a movie to be in a movie doesn't really affect their enjoyment. But for me, it does up until a certain point, and this movie does have rule of cool moments, and if you don't really know what I'm referring to, they're just kind of moments that aren't necessarily explained thoroughly well and just kind of done because it's like, hey, da-da, like that's awesome, but might not make sense, might not be explained, etc., etc. And I'm not saying things need to be thoroughly dissected and thoroughly explained, no matter, I'm not one of those channels nor, pedantic level of critique people, but there are moments that are convenient or as per the rule of cool, done to look cool, or just done for the sake of a laugh, which, may involve and invite, should I say, a little bit of questioning from audience members like myself. And there are some moments, like in the third act as well, that there's really important plot things that are allowed to go forward that are predicated off one moment, and it reminds me of that whole kind of, and it's not as severe, like this wasn't really that severe in No Way Home, but like that Ned moment where he could just open up portals, but when it needed to happen, he couldn't really do it. It's similar to that, but even bigger. It's just like, oh, do this, oh, I can't do it, do this, I can do it. But either way, I don't think this will hold any kind of weight on those who seem to enjoy every single MCU movie. If you're one of those people, and fair enough, you will have absolutely zero issues in that area. There are some other frustrating moments where the characters, like, you almost want to scream at the screen. Like, as much as I'm enjoying this movie, again, I'm watching this also to make a review. And there's those moments where if you're running away from, let's just say, a monster, right, and you close the door behind them, you're going to keep on running, right? But no, hey, let's just stand there and just wait to see if they're going to get through the door. Okay? Keep zooming into the door. The character's still looking. What's going on? Why aren't you running? What are you doing? Like, there's moments like that where I'm just like, again, everyone's different. People might not have those kind of standards and just, really enjoy the tension and stuff like that and what they're doing. But I think that might come under the Sam Raimi just trying to do his thing with the horror and just, let's ignore a little bit of logic there for, like, the sake of what we're trying to achieve in this moment. You might love that, you might not like it. I actually wish this movie as well was longer than what it was. I feel like it could have benefited from it. Now, again, this may be different for other people. A lot of, I feel like, MCU fans like the kind of shorter-esque movies. For example, to compare it to that of the Batman, for a lot of, I would say, general moviegoers or MCU fans, that was, like, way too long or, like, air quotes, boring for them. So I'm not saying it should have been 2 hours and 46 minutes like that of the Batman. But for me, especially after hearing recently that Sam Raimi said that his first cut was around 2 hours and 40 minutes, then went down to around 2 hours and 5 minutes in total, that's really interesting to me. And I'm not saying I would have wanted it 2 hours 40 minutes, but maybe around 2 hours 20, 2.5 hours. I just feel like I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in certain areas. Because with the constant barrage of entertaining stuff that's being thrown at you, I'm not saying it's an exhausting movie, but I just feel like there could have been more to it. Because when it's just wrapped up in the time allotment that it does have, it just feels like, oh, it's over. It would have been nice to, flesh it out by an extra 20 minutes. As for Danny Elfman's score, loved it. I have absolutely no issues in that department. Full of, like, wonder and all, the action and the dramatic moments. It's just needless to say for me. I don't see why anyone would really have an issue with the score of the movie. The end credit scenes, second one, you don't have to stay for at all. The first one, the mid-credits, if you will, definitely sets up that kind of, what's to come. It's just like, what's going on? Okay. That is that kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's mind-blowing, but it's definitely something like I could make a whole video out of, and it's like, this could be happening in the next Doctor Strange, or what could be going on after this. Overall, guys, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I had a good time. It's an enjoyable movie, I would say. The performances are decent to then, I would say, pretty great from certain actors. It changes the formula from that of a typical MCU movie in ways that I really enjoyed, but not as much as what is being boasted, if that makes sense, but certainly enough that is refreshing, and it ties in the whole multiverse highlights of recent times in pretty nicely, but not as much as what you may think. More complimentary, to be honest, than what is actually going on. It is definitely, as I said at the very beginning of the review, more madness oriented. In conclusion there, I would just say dial down expectations. Whether you agree or disagree with me, if you've already seen it, fair enough, but it's just not all that, and that's not me coming down on the movie. I just don't think this movie is all that. It's still an enjoyable time, and it's a fun Raimi flick, and his stamp on a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. I don't really do ratings, so if I had to give 2 thumbs up, 2 thumbs down, or whatever I want to do with my 2 hands here, it would be kind of like a... it'd be kind of like a that thing. It's not thumbs down. This one's like here. This isn't fully up, if you know what I mean, like giving it a strong praise. It's kind of like there. And that's kind of like decent praise, if you know what I mean. This one's kind of doing that. It's 1 thumbs up, almost fully up, if you know what I mean. And, I can't quite put this down because that's, I don't think it deserves that at all. But I can't give it near to 2 thumbs up. This is such a weird way of grading. But it's kind of like that. That's too far down. It needs to be like that. It's like that. I don't know what number that would come out to, but I don't want to give it that. I don't want to even give it that. It just needs to be something like that. I'll leave the rest down to you. So what did you think of this movie? If you have seen it, please give non-spoiler generalized thoughts. Are you looking forward to this movie? If you haven't seen it, if you've got to this part, do let me know that as well. It'll be interesting to see how many people got to this part having not seen the movie as well. I'll be trying my best to do follow-up videos on little bits and pieces as we ramp up the Marvel content on this channel, so do subscribe for more future videos like this and all kinds of pop culture news, reviews, and all kinds of other things. But I'm gonna look forward to reading your comments, guys, and I hope you have a good time with this movie. It is a fun Raimi stamp on the MCU, as I keep saying, and hope you enjoy your time in the Multiverse of Madness. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.